I'll never forget that Saturday. It started off as one of those rare, golden days when everything felt perfect. The sun was warm but not unbearable, the air smelled of freshly cut grass, and I could hear the soft laughter of my kids as they decorated the backyard for my birthday barbecue. "Dad, we put the balloons too high," my son yelled, struggling with a roll of tape while my daughter giggled. I chuckled, setting down the tray of marinated chicken I'd been working on. "Looks perfect to me, buddy. Today's about fun, not perfection." It wasn't just any birthday. It was the first time in years that my entire family, cousins included, were able to get together in one place. After months of planning, I'd finally managed to organize a backyard barbecue with everyone I loved. My wife, Sarah, was in charge of the cake. The kids were in charge of decorations. And me? I was on grill duty. The smell of charcoal starting to burn mixed with the tangy scent of the barbecue sauce I'd prepared the night before. Music drifted softly from the portable speaker. Classic old-school hits. Nothing too loud, just enough to give everything a cozy, cheerful vibe. Neighbors walking their dogs waved as they passed by. A couple even shouted, "Happy birthday!" over the fence. For once, it felt like the whole world was in sync with me. But, little did I know, there was one neighbor who wasn't about to let me enjoy this day in peace. Her name was Karen, and if you've ever dealt with one, you know exactly the type. Always watching, always complaining, always ready to stir up drama. Karen lived directly next door, and from the moment we moved into the neighborhood 2 years earlier, she had made her disapproval of us clear. Whether it was, "Your kids are too loud on the trampoline," or "Your trash bins are out 10 minutes too early," she always had something to nag about. So when the party started, I already had this little knot of anxiety in my stomach. I kept telling myself, "Ignore it. Today is about family. She can't ruin this for you." By noon, my backyard was buzzing with laughter. Cousins were clinking soda cans, my uncle was telling one of his long-winded fishing stories, and my mom kept sneaking bites of the chips before dinner was even served. Then, just as I flipped the first batch of burgers on the grill, I heard it. Her voice. "Excuse me." Karen's voice had that sharp, shrill tone that cut through everything. The laughter, the music, even the crackling of the grill seemed to fade as I turned and saw her standing on her side of the fence, arms crossed, lips pursed tight like she'd bitten into a lemon. I sighed internally. Here we go. "Hi, Karen," I forced to smile. "Beautiful day, huh?" Her eyes narrowed. "Not so beautiful when I can't hear myself think because of all this racket." The music wasn't even loud. It was background noise. And my family, they weren't exactly a rock band. But to Karen, any joy that didn't include her was apparently offensive. "I'm just having a little birthday barbecue," I said calmly, trying to keep the peace. "Music's not loud, I promise. We'll be wrapping up by evening." She scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Well, it's already too much. Some of us have better things to do than listen to this circus." Sarah, standing beside me with a plate of potato salad, whispered under her breath, "Here she goes again." I tried to reason with her. "Look, it's my birthday, and it's just family. We're not throwing some all-night rager. Why don't you just close your windows if it bothers you?" That was the wrong thing to say. Her face turned red instantly. "Excuse me? I shouldn't have to shut myself inside because you don't know how to be a considerate neighbor." She snapped, her voice rising enough that my guests started glancing over. I could feel my patience wearing thin, but I took a deep breath. "Karen, we'll be done in a few hours. Please, just let us enjoy the day." She glared for a moment, muttering something under her breath before stomping away. I hoped that was the end of it. But little did I know, She wasn't finished. Not even close. Because when Karen didn't get her way, she always had a backup plan. And that backup plan usually involved calling someone with a badge. As I turned back to the grill, my brother leaned in. "Man, she's wound tighter than a drum. You think she's going to let it go?" I shook my head slowly. Honestly, I don't know. But something tells me she's just getting started. And oh, I was right. Because not even an hour later, just as the party hit its stride, we heard the sound of sirens approaching the neighborhood. At first, I thought maybe it was just coincidence. But then, the flashing red and blue lights reflected off the fence, and the knot in my stomach tightened like a vice. Karen had done it. She had actually called the cops. And that's when my perfect birthday turned into something I'd never forget. The moment I saw those flashing red and blue lights bounce off my fence, my heart dropped. It was like the entire party hit pause. The music faded into the background, the laughter went quiet, and all eyes turned toward the front of my house. Are those cops?" my cousin whispered, her soda can frozen halfway to her lips. My wife Sarah looked at me, eyes wide. Oh no, she didn't. But I knew she did. Karen. Of course she had. I set the spatula down on the side of the grill, wiped my hands on my jeans, and muttered under my breath, "Unbelievable. My birthday, my family, my peaceful little barbecue, and she actually called the police on us." The gate creaked open as two officers stepped into the backyard. One was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of stern face that told you he wasn't in the mood for nonsense. The other was younger, maybe fresh out of training, trying hard to look serious but with eyes that scanned curiously over the balloons, the picnic tables, the kids giggling nervously near the swing set. The tall officer spoke first. "Afternoon. We received a noise complaint." I forced a polite smile, though inside I was boiling. "Officers, I promise it's just a small family barbecue. Music's low, kids are playing, that's it." Before they could respond, Karen appeared, like she'd been waiting for her cue. She marched up to the fence, arms crossed, face full of smug satisfaction. "There they are. This is what I've been dealing with all day. Absolute chaos. I told you it was out of control." The younger officer raised an eyebrow, glancing from her to us. "Chaos? Really? We had a picnic table covered in paper plates and soda bottles, my uncle slowly sipping lemonade, and my mom complaining about her bad back. It looked more like a church potluck than a wild party." Still, the older officer turned back to me. "Sir, do you mind turning the music down a little?" I nodded quickly. "Of course, no problem." I pulled out my phone and turned the volume down until it was barely above a whisper. Karen wasn't satisfied. "That's not enough. They've been screaming, laughing, making a ruckus for hours. I demand you shut this thing down completely." The officer gave her a look I couldn't quite read, somewhere between annoyance and disbelief. "Ma'am, with all due respect, this looks like a normal family gathering." Her face twitched. "Normal? Normal? I can't even watch my programs with all this noise. And the smoke, look at this. It's blowing right into my yard. I could sue for this." The younger officer tried to hide a smirk. "Sue for barbecue smoke, ma'am?" Karen turned on him like a hawk. "Don't you get smart with me, young man. I pay taxes too, you know." At that point, some of my family couldn't hold back. My brother snorted. My cousin muttered, "You've got to be kidding." Sarah squeezed my arm, whispering, "Please don't lose your temper. That's what she wants." I took a breath and kept my voice calm. "Officers, we'll keep the noise down, I promise. But shutting down my son's decorations, my wife's cake, and my mom's chance to see our grandkids, that's not happening." The older officer gave me a small nod, then turned back to Karen. "Ma'am, unless there's an actual violation here, there's nothing we can enforce. These folks are well within their rights to have a backyard barbecue." I'll never forget the look on Karen's face in that moment. Her jaw actually dropped. She looked like someone had just told her the earth was flat. You're siding with them?" she shrieked, pointing at us like we were hardened criminals. The officer stayed steady. "We're not siding with anyone. We're telling you there's no violation here. If you'd like, we can file a report that a complaint was made, but that's as far as it goes." Karen's eyes darted around, desperate for something, anything to cling to. Then she pointed at the grill. "What about that? That smoke is a health hazard. My doctor said I can't inhale toxins. Arrest him for that." My uncle burst out laughing. "Arrest him? For grilling chicken? Lady, are you serious?" The younger officer actually coughed into his hand, clearly hiding laughter. Even the older officer's expression softened, as if he was struggling not to roll his eyes. "Ma'am, a barbecue grill is not a criminal matter. Please, let these folks enjoy their afternoon." But Karen didn't back down. She leaned closer over the fence, hissing at me, "This isn't over. You'll regret this." I met her eyes, my patience finally snapping just a little. "Karen, it's my birthday. If ruining it makes you happy, congratulations, you tried. But I'm not letting you win." Her face twisted in fury, but before she could fire back, the older officer cut her off. "Ma'am, that's enough. If we get called back here again for a frivolous complaint, you could be the one facing consequences. Understood?" Karen froze. For the first time, she didn't have a snappy comeback. She just glared at me, like she wanted to set me on fire with her eyes. The officers gave me a polite nod and left, their cruiser pulling away slowly down the street. My guests let out a collective sigh of relief. My daughter whispered, "Dad, that was scary." I hugged her close. "It's okay, sweetheart. Everything's fine now." But in the pit of my stomach, I knew it wasn't fine. Not with Karen. She didn't get her way, and people like her, they never let it go. Sure enough, not 20 minutes later, as I was cutting the cake and everyone was singing happy birthday, I saw movement at the corner of the yard. Karen wasn't done. She was back. And this time, she had her phone out, recording everything. At first, I thought maybe Karen was just being nosy again, peeking over the fence like she always did, but then I saw the glint of her phone. She wasn't just watching, she was recording. I froze with the knife halfway through my birthday cake. My wife, Sarah, noticed too. "Oh my God, is she filming us?" "Looks like it," I muttered, my jaw tightening. Karen's phone was angled directly into our yard, her finger moving across the screen as she narrated loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Look at this. Disturbing the peace, smoke polluting the neighborhood, unsupervised children running wild. I have evidence now. This is going straight to the HOA and the police if they won't act." The nerve of her! My daughter clutched my arm, whispering, "Dad, why is she filming me?" My heart sunk, because she was right. Karen wasn't just filming the grill or the noise, she was filming everything, including my kids. That's when the atmosphere shifted. My guests, who had just been singing happy birthday, now sat stiff and uneasy. My mom muttered, "That woman's lost her mind." My brother, less polite, said, "Hey lady, you can't film kids without permission." Karen just smirked, zooming in closer with her phone. "Oh, I can. It's called gathering evidence. Maybe you people should have thought about that before disturbing an entire neighborhood." I set the knife down and walked toward the fence, keeping my voice firm but measured. "Karen, put the phone down. You're crossing a line now." She leaned in, her grin almost wicked. "What are you gonna do about it, birthday boy? You don't own the air. If your noise spills into my property, I have the right to document it." Every muscle in my body screamed to snatch that phone right out of her hand. But I knew that's exactly what she wanted. If I so much as touched her, she'd scream, "Assault! faster than I could blink. My wife grabbed my arm. "Don't! She's baiting you!" So instead, I took out my own phone and hit record, pointing it right back at her. "Fine, Karen, you're recording me, I'm recording you. Let's see who looks crazier when this hits the HOA." Her smug grin faltered for just a second, but she quickly recovered. "Perfect! Now I have proof of harassment, too." The kids looked scared, and that's what really lit a fire in me. I raised my voice loud enough for my whole family to hear. "Karen, this is my birthday. My family is here to celebrate. We are not disturbing the peace, and the police already told you that. If you keep filming my children, I will file a harassment complaint myself." That got murmurs of support from my relatives. My cousin clapped his hands. "Yeah, we got your back." Karen's eyes darted nervously for a moment, realizing she was outnumbered, but instead of backing off, she doubled down. "You people think this is funny? You think the law doesn't apply to you? Fine, let's see how funny it is when the HOA board sees this footage, or better yet, when the county health department shuts you down for unsafe food handling." I blinked in disbelief. Unsafe food handling? Are you kidding me? My brother laughed so hard he nearly choked on his soda. "Lady, it's chicken on a grill, not a meth lab." Even some of my guests who had been nervous before started chuckling, the absurdity of it all sinking in. But Karen didn't laugh. She clutched her phone like it was a weapon, muttering into it as she kept recording every bite of cake, every laugh, every spark from the grill. And then she made her next move. She stepped back from the fence, raised her voice even louder, and shouted, "I feel threatened. He's harassing me. He's intimidating me in front of my own home." My blood ran cold. I wasn't within arm's reach of her, hadn't raised a finger, but I knew where this was going. She was building a case, a fake one, to twist the story. My wife's voice was tight with fear. "She's setting you up. She's trying to make it look like you're the aggressor." And she was right. Karen was spinning her own narrative, filming just enough to make herself look like the victim. That's when my uncle stood up, raising his voice loud enough for her camera to catch. "Hey everyone, let's all wave at Karen. She's filming our favorite neighbors." The entire party, kids, cousins, even my mom, started waving and laughing toward her phone. It turned the whole thing into a joke, and I swear I saw Karen's face twitch with frustration. But instead of leaving, she shouted back, "Go ahead and laugh. You won't be laughing when you get a notice in the mail." Then she stormed off, disappearing into her house and slamming the door so hard the fence rattled. Everyone exhaled at once, relief washing over the yard. My daughter whispered, "Is she gone for real this time?" I wanted to believe she was. I wanted to say, "Yes, sweetheart, that's the end of it." But deep down, I knew better. Karen didn't slam doors as an ending. She slammed doors as a warning shot. And sure enough, as the sun began to set and we started packing up leftovers, I spotted something in my mailbox at the edge of the yard. A letter with the HOA's logo stamped right across the front. When I pulled that envelope from the mailbox, I swear my hands started to shake. The bold HOA logo stared back at me like some kind of warning sign. My stomach churned as I tore it open, praying it was something harmless, like a newsletter or a landscaping reminder. But no, it was a formal violation notice. "Dear homeowner," it began in that cold, bureaucratic tone, "we have received a complaint regarding excessive noise, smoke, and disruptive activities on your property. This constitutes a violation of community standards, and further occurrences may result in fines or legal action." I felt my blood pressure spike. Disruptive activities? Legal action? Over my birthday barbecue? Sarah leaned over my shoulder, reading it too. "Are you serious? She actually filed a complaint the same day?" I could practically hear Karen's voice in the text, smug, self-righteous, dripping with satisfaction. She hadn't just wanted to ruin my birthday, she wanted to leave a stain on it, a permanent record. By then, most of my guests had left, giving me sympathetic hugs and muttering things like, "Don't let her get to you," and "She's not worth the stress." But when the last car pulled away, I finally let myself explode. "Unbelievable!" I shouted, crumpling the letter in my fist. "She calls the cops, she films us, and now she drags the HOA into this? What's next, the FBI?" Sarah rubbed my back, trying to calm me down. "We'll fight it. You didn't do anything wrong." But in the back of my mind, doubt started to creep in. HOAs don't always care about who's right. They care about paperwork, about keeping peace. And Karen? She was a master of paperwork. She'd weaponize every rule, every regulation, every clause in that handbook just to make my life miserable. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured Karen smiling smugly across the fence, waving that violation letter like a trophy. The next morning, I decided I wasn't going to sit back and take it. I dug out my HOA handbook and sat at the kitchen table with a pot of coffee, flipping through every page. If she was going to play the rules game, I was going to learn them better than she ever could. And that's when I realized something. Karen had overplayed her hand. The violation notice mentioned excessive noise past quiet hours. But my party ended by 8 p.m. The cops themselves had witnessed that. It also cited smoke disturbance. But the handbook clearly stated grilling in private backyards is permitted provided it is conducted safely. I was safe, lid on, coals managed, no hazard. In other words, Karen had lied. That gave me a spark of hope. If I could prove she exaggerated or outright fabricated the complaint, I could not only clear my name, but maybe even turn the tables on her. I started gathering evidence. My brother had filmed part of the barbecue when Karen barged in. My cousin caught the cops telling her there was no violation. And of course I had my own recording of her screaming and filming my kids. Piece by piece, I was building a defense. But I wasn't the only one, because as I learned later that week, Karen wasn't done yet. 3 days after my birthday, another letter arrived, this one thicker, with multiple pages stapled together. It wasn't just a violation notice, it was a formal complaint packet. Karen had submitted photos, videos, and a 3-page written statement accusing me of being a menace to the neighborhood. She claimed I regularly hosted loud, disruptive gatherings, left toxic smoke clouds drifting into her yard, and even suggested my children were unsupervised hazards. Reading that last line nearly made me tear the packet in half. She dragged my kids into this. That was the final straw. Sarah's voice was trembling with anger. "She's obsessed. This isn't about noise. This is personal." And she was right. Karen wasn't fighting for peace and quiet. She was fighting for control. She wanted to dominate the neighborhood, to make sure everyone bent to her will. And she had chosen me as the example. I knew I had to take this to the next level. No more just defending myself, I had to go on offense. So I reached out to some of my other neighbors, the ones who had waved and wished me happy birthday, the ones who'd lived next to Karen long before I moved in. And sure enough, I started hearing the same stories. She complained when my daughter practiced violin. She called animal control because my dog barked twice in one afternoon. She filed a complaint because my Christmas lights were too bright. It wasn't just me. Karen had been terrorizing the whole street. And now I had witnesses. One by one, they agreed to put their experiences in writing, even offering to speak to the HOA directly. Turns out I wasn't the only one tired of her reign of terror. By the end of the week, I had a folder thick with statements, video clips, and even a petition signed by 6 neighbors who were sick of Karen's constant complaints. I remember closing that folder with a satisfying smack and thinking, "You picked the wrong neighbor this time, Karen." But just as I started to feel confident, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, I found 2 HOA board members standing there, holding clipboards and looking serious. "Mr. Harris, we need to talk about the complaints filed against you." When I opened the door and saw 2 HOA board members standing on my porch, I felt that familiar knot tighten in my stomach. One was a tall man in his 50s with a clipboard tucked under his arm. The other, a younger woman with sharp glasses and a serious expression. They weren't here for a friendly chat. I could see it in their eyes. "Mr. Harris," the man said, "we'd like a word about the complaints filed against you." I motioned them inside, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course. Come on in." Sarah brought them water, though neither touched it. They sat at the dining table like judges about to hand down a sentence. The woman with the glasses opened a folder stuffed with papers. "As you know," she began, "HOA guidelines are designed to protect the quality of life in our community. We've received multiple reports of disturbances originating from your property." I could almost hear Karen's smug voice echoing behind her words. Reports. Plural. She'd probably filed half of them herself under different excuses. The man added, "Our goal isn't to punish anyone unnecessarily, but we need to address these concerns fairly." I leaned forward, my folder of evidence resting on the table like a shield. "I respect that. But before we go any further, you should see the full picture. Because what you've been given isn't the truth. It's one neighbor's personal vendetta." Their eyebrows lifted slightly, curious. I slid the first sheet across, the police report from that day, which clearly stated no violations were found. Then the videos, one from my brother showing Karen screaming at us, one from my cousin catching the cops explaining there was no issue, and finally, my own recording of her filming the kids and shouting about toxic smoke. The woman adjusted her glasses, replaying the clip twice. "This is concerning." "That's not all," I said, flipping open the petition. "These are statements from 6 other households on this street. Every single one has dealt with harassment from Karen. False complaints, harassment over trivial issues, even threats of lawsuits over nothing." The man read a few of the statements out loud. "She called the HOA because our trash bins were out at 6:30 instead of 7. She accused us of animal neglect because our dog barked at the mailman." By the third one, he sighed and rubbed his temples. Good grief. Sarah leaned in, her voice calm but firm. "We've put up with this quietly for months. But this, filing complaints on my husband's birthday, filming our children without consent, dragging our family through this circus, enough is enough." For a long moment, the board members just sat there in silence, flipping through the folder. My heart pounded, waiting for their verdict. Finally, the woman closed the file and looked me in the eye. "Mr. Harris, based on what we've seen, I believe you are not in violation of any HOA rules. In fact," she glanced at her colleague, who nodded, "it appears your neighbor may be misusing the HOA system to target you unfairly." I felt the weight lift off my shoulders so suddenly it was almost dizzying. Sarah squeezed my hand under the table. The man added, "We'll be bringing this to the next board meeting. Her pattern of behavior can't continue unchecked. If she keeps filing false or frivolous complaints, she could face fines or even lose certain privileges within the HOA." I wanted to cheer, but I kept my composure. "Thank you. That's all we've ever wanted, just fairness." They stood, shook my hand, and left with the evidence folder tucked under their arm. As the door closed behind them, Sarah wrapped me in a tight hug. "You did it! You stood up to her!" But even as relief washed over me, a small voice in the back of my head whispered, "Karen isn't going to take this lying down." And I was right, because a week later, at the HOA meeting, she made her final desperate play. The room was packed. Neighbors filled every chair, some standing in the back, murmuring quietly as the board called the meeting to order. I spotted Karen in the front row, arms crossed, lips pursed like she was ready to wage war. When her turn came to speak, she launched into a tirade. This man has made my life unbearable. He throws loud, disruptive parties, he pollutes the air with smoke, he lets his children run wild like animals." Murmurs of disapproval rippled through the room, but not at me, at her. One by one, neighbors stood up. "Karen, my daughter can't even practice violin without you filing a complaint. You called animal control because my puppy barked at the mailman. You tried to get my Christmas lights fined." It was like the floodgates had opened. Every grudge, every frustration, every ridiculous complaint she'd ever filed came pouring out right there in front of the board. Karen's face went pale, then red, then pale again. She sputtered, "You're all ganging up on me. I'm the only one who cares about rules around here." The board chair raised his hand, silencing the room. "Enough. We've heard from both sides. And the decision is unanimous. The complaints against Mr. Harris are dismissed. Furthermore, any further frivolous or harassing complaints will result in disciplinary action against the filer." Gasps and whispers filled the room. Karen's mouth dropped open in shock. For once, she had no comeback. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding but triumphant. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. But as I glanced across the room, Karen's eyes locked onto mine, and the look she gave me wasn't defeat. It was a promise. This wasn't over. Not for her. I'll never forget the silence in that HOA meeting room. It was the kind of silence that makes you hear the hum of the fluorescent lights above your head. Everyone's eyes were darting between me and Karen, like they were waiting for a boxing match to start. My palms were sweaty, but I kept my face calm. Sarah squeezed my hand under the table, reminding me that I wasn't alone. Karen, of course, had her arms crossed, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown, and that permanent scowl painted across her face. She started with her usual tone, sharp, self-righteous, like she owned the whole neighborhood. "This man," she said, jabbing a finger toward me, "has repeatedly disturbed the peace of our community. His so-called birthday party was loud, disruptive, and absolutely inappropriate. I had no choice but to call the police. We pay HOA fees for a reason, and those reasons include peace and quiet." Some people shifted in their chairs, but not in agreement, more like they were embarrassed for her. The HOA chair, Mr. Williams, leaned forward, his glasses sliding down his nose. "Mrs. Jennings," he said firmly, "we've already received the police report. According to the officers, there was no violation of noise ordinances. The report states clearly, family gathering, normal activity, no citations issued." Karen's jaw dropped for half a second, but then she doubled down. "That's because the police don't live here. They don't have to put up with the racket, the smell of smoke, the strangers parking in front of my house." I couldn't help it. I cut in. "You mean my mom, my uncle, my kids' cousins? Karen, those strangers are family. You tried to ruin a little girl's birthday just because you don't like balloons in a backyard." There was a chuckle from someone sitting behind us. Karen snapped her head around, glaring, but that only made it worse. More people tried to hide their laughter. I could feel the tension tilting, and for once it wasn't against me. Sarah spoke up then, her voice calm but firm. "We've lived here for 6 years. We've never once had a complaint until Karen moved in. We mow our lawn, we follow the rules, we show up at meetings. All we wanted was to celebrate our daughter's birthday." She paused, then added, "It says more about Karen than it does about us." The HOA board members exchanged glances. The younger woman on the board even nodded slightly, scribbling notes like she was tallying points in our favor. Karen banged her hand on the table. "You're all just ignoring the facts. If you let this go, what's next? Block parties, loud music, beer cans littered across lawns? This neighborhood will go downhill." Mr. Williams raised his hand, cutting her off. His voice was steady, but it carried weight. "Karen, enough. You've brought multiple complaints since you moved here. Not one has been validated. In fact, several neighbors have filed counter-complaints about you harassing them." Karen froze. Her face went red, and for once she didn't have a quick comeback. I leaned forward, keeping my voice steady. "All I wanted was to grill burgers for my kids. You turned it into a police incident. And now, you've turned it into a circus. I think it's time we all stop pretending this is about peace and quiet. This is about control. And you don't get to control my family." The room was dead silent for a beat. Then came the sound. A slow, deliberate clap. It was my uncle sitting in the back, smirking with his baseball cap tipped low. A few others joined in until half the room was clapping. Not wild applause, but enough to make the point. Karen's face twisted into something between rage and humiliation. She grabbed her bag, muttered something about lawyers, and stormed out of the meeting hall. I just sat there, my chest heaving, half in disbelief. Sarah leaned closer and whispered, "You did it." But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about winning against Karen. It was about standing up, finally, to the fear that she had been using to control our whole neighborhood. And as the door slammed behind her, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe things were about to change for good. But little did I know, the story wasn't quite over yet.